My name is Daniel Lin, and I'm the founder of FutureWard. And this is the first in our series, hopefully a series of talks called FutureWard Forum. And so this is a platform for people to exchange ideas, and it's part of our larger mission to kind of cultivate a creative community around this space. And so FutureWord Central is not just a co-working space. We have obviously a large open co-working area, but we also have 17 private offices, event spaces like this one, and a larger one outside. And in the back, we have a makerspace where there's digital fabrication tools and hopefully in the future a food lab, and we can do some interesting things. So this will be a series of more talks that FutureWord is putting together that's kind of complement to the Harvard Massive events. So if anyone's interested in speaking or they have something to share, let us know and talk to our community manager, Stephanie, who's at the front there. And if you're interested in becoming a member or have any questions about the space, just ask any of us. And so without further ado, let me introduce our speaker today, who just over there. So we're very lucky today to have Ben Chao talk to us about UI UX design. He's very experienced designer in this field, so I'll just let him talk more about what he's going to speak about today.
Hi, everybody. So before I give this talk, I'm kind of curious what everybody does here. And so how many people are in the design field? Handful, all right. How many people are in like engineering or development? And what about business? All right. So we got a good mixture of people. I'm Ben. I'm a UI UX developer at OPower. And for the better part of the last 3 years, I've been crafting OPower's design system. And hopefully this talk will give you a glimpse of like what a design system is, why your company, if it does software, or maybe perhaps hardware, would need it. And so let's get started. And before I talk about OPower and our design system, I want to talk about this experiment that happened. Robert Cialdini is a behavioral researcher, and he was interested in knowing what motivated people to save energy. So he conducted a survey with a lot of people, and 3 themes emerged. People said that saving money, saving the planet, and being a good citizen were all reasons that would motivate them to save energy. So he wanted to see if this was true or not. So he conducted an experiment where he printed out door hangers and posted them in the beginning of summer in San Diego in 2001. And at the end of the summer, each door hanger had one of these messages. And at the end of the summer, he would go around all these homes and collect their meter reads and see if there was actually an impact on their energy use. So how many of you think the first message, saving money, had the biggest impact on energy savings? And how many people think saving planet had the most impact? All right, only one. And how many people thought being a good citizen had the most savings for people? All right. How many people think none of these worked? That's right. None of these had any impact on saving. However, Robert Cialdini had a hunch that like these 3 themes wouldn't work. So he had another door hanger that basically said, your neighbor, did you know that your neighbors is using less than you? And this actually, houses that had this door hanger actually ended up using 6% less than from their previous year's usage. So what this pointed out was that in our quest to help save energy, there's 2 ways you can do things. A lot of companies take the more traditional approach, which is changing their products, developing products that are more energy efficient. but Robert Cialdini's experience showed us that we can also design for change by changing people's behavior. And this is exactly what O-Power, the company I work for, does. Our mission is to motivate everybody in the world to save energy. So the first product that we had was this. It's a home energy report. It's a paper product. We send this out to utility companies, and we basically collect information from utility companies about people's energy use. And we tell them exactly how much they're using compared to the neighbors. And people that receive this product typically start using 3 to 5% less than they previously did. And this is a huge savings because it doesn't require extra hardware. We're just using what we know about the user and telling them in a way that they can understand and they can take action. And over the years, we've partnered with like 120 utility companies in the United States. And each of these companies uses our products. Our product is kind of special in the way that it's a white label thing. So that means when we sell to utility companies and we start engaging with customers, all of our products are actually branded in the utility's look and feel. And also over the years, we've developed more and more products. We not only have paper products, but now we have email, we have web products, we also have SMS. We basically use any channel that we can talk to customers and try to engage them, let them know about their energy use, and try to convince them to save energy. But having so many products and so many clients poses a lot of challenges for us. And the three main things that emerged from a couple years ago was there was lack of consistency across all of our products. We had so many platforms, so many tech stacks, and so many designers working on different products. It was hard to enforce a consistency across all of our products. The other challenges was that our home energy report was designed in 2007, and after 6 years, the look just got really outdated. So it was time for a refresh for all of our products. And the third thing is this customization that I mentioned. Because we're a white label product and we have to customize it to each utility's look and feel, what ended up happening was that each product had their own philosophy of what customization meant. And this was a huge burden on our sales and business development team because there wasn't a consistent way to tell people, hey, you buy our suite of products and this is how they're going to impact your communication with your customers. So our solution to this, which is something I've been working on, is a design system called O-Pattern. And this is the public-facing site for our design system. And like it said, it's basically created for anybody who creates products. It's for designers, developers, writers. It's for business people too, so that they can understand what our system is. And after working on this for 2-3 years, we now have every single product on the system. We've definitely solved a lot of the issues and challenges that I pointed out. But one of the important things that was beyond that emerged beyond the artifacts of what we did was that we actually improved the process of how we create products and how we design products. So before I get into what actually is in our design system, I want to talk about a couple of existing design systems. Some of them you may know. The first one is material design. How many people have heard of material design before? It's a great style guide design system, right? When it came out, all the designers were kind of drooling over it. So yeah, they did a really good job. I find it kind of interesting that they actually hired Huge, an outside agency, to do this, but I think given how big Google was, maybe it was a challenge for them to get every designer on the same page. Another design system that we looked at for inspiration was Salesforce design systems. And Salesforce, in terms of business model, is probably closest to what we do. They have a white label product, they have many, many, many clients, and they need to adapt their design system to different client needs. The third one I wanted to point out, and this one is just a personal favorite of mine, it is the design system for US government. So Yes, there is a design system for the U.S. government. They apply it to all of. They haven't applied to all of the U.S. government websites, but they recognized the need to have one so that when people engage with civic websites, they need a consistent way to know how to navigate through their information and how to interact with their system. So, what is actually in our design system? The first thing we did was basically our design system contains every single thing that is in the presentation layer of a product. And the first thing we did was we audited our typography system. And then we created a type scale that made sense for the messages that we wrote, but also for what our product needed to communicate. And we didn't just develop type scale, but we had rules on like what type scale you should use for what type of messaging. For example, our display type is used to communicate important insights about people's energy use, whereas our headings are used to communicate structure within the website so people can know what section they're looking at. And keep in mind that we basically had 3 different mediums we had to work in. There's web, print, and email. So we had to create a type scale for all of these things. Mostly, for digital, we keep it the same type scale, but for print, we have a totally different system. The other thing we had to do was define a color system that made sense. So we looked at our branding and also colors that would communicate efficiency and also alerts and redesign all of our layouts and icons through that. We also have many shades of gray. And gray is actually the best color for designers, right? Yeah. So our shades of gray, you'll see how it's used later in the next example, but this is all the colors that we actually use in our products. There are some other accent colors, but primarily these are the colors that a client has to deal with. Another issue that we had to solve was our illustrations and photography. Previously, a lot of our products had photographs, and it's really hard to keep a consistent look and feel in photographs because there's issues with lighting, there's issues with like how close something is focused on, and how do you communicate the same look and feel across like photographs was just a really hard challenge. So we developed an illustration style that we could use to communicate energy efficiency behaviors or objects. So over here we have, this first one over here is about like hanging your clothes instead of using the dryer. And the second one is like one that we use when we need to direct people to looking at the AC unit. On the flip side of illustrations, we also had to rethink our icon system. And we actually use an icon system called Iconic. We've extended it a little bit to add like specific icons that we need that's not in the system. But this is part of the design system that we have as well. Another thing that we had to do was create a grid system for all of our products. And again, we had to do this for web, print, and email as well. For web components, for websites and digital products, we had to create a component library. So this includes like typical web form elements like buttons, links, how do you style that, what's the interaction with it. And last but not least, and this is actually my favorite part about our design system, is we develop a voice and tone of how do we communicate to our clients. Because before having this design system, there was a lot of confusion as to like how do we refer to the user. Do we talk to the user as you, or do I talk to the user as me, right? And also like having consistency in like how do we communicate like hard to understand energy concepts. And so we developed a system that we developed a writing guide that all of our content people can look at and know exactly what's the voice and tone of how to talk to our customers. So these components are basically what makes up our design system. And we've exposed it through design artifacts, through Illustrator and Sketch. And we also develop it into a front-end system so that we can actually use it in all of our products. And so far, it's been 2 years. We've had tremendous improvement in all of the problems that I pointed out earlier in all of our products. But I think the more interesting thing for me is how the design system has changed the way we work. And the first thing that it changed was how do we reference past work? How do we look for inspiration? And what are the artifacts that come out in each design project? Typically, when we have before the design system, when we had a design project, it would typically consist of a UX designer and a visual designer, and then we would look for inspiration from and consistency from past products. A lot of our products that we worked on before reference the original home energy report that was developed in 2007 for their look and feel and their content guidelines. And at the end of a design project, we typically develop like a spec that we hand to engineers. After the design system, after having the design system, we still staff up a project with 2 designers, but one is a UX designer, one is a design systems designer. And our reference for consistency is through the design system. But the most important thing out of this process is that not only do we produce a product spec, but we keep updating our design system so it reflects the most current thinking and how do we solve for the issues that I pointed out. So as we work through more and more projects, our design system became more and more incomplete so that it can eventually take care of all the products that we need to work on at OPAR. The other thing that having the design system change was the structure of our UX team. And before the design system, what's considered UX or product design basically consisted of these 4 roles. There's a UX designer who develops flows and looks at business goals and user needs and try to solve for them. There's a UX researcher who typically does qualitative and quantitative research. And then there's the visual designer who develops a look and feel. And then there's a content strategist who takes care of like the words, right? But after having the design system, product design now consists mainly of the UX designer and UX researcher, and the design system is the visual designer, the content strategist, and the front-end developer. And there's 2 interesting things that kind of came out of this. One is by having the UX designer and UX researcher focus solely on product design, we were actually able to spend a lot more time focusing on this. What is the exact behavior and what is the exact information that we need to influence people's, to motivate people to save energy? With the design system, we were able to remove a lot of the fundamental questions of how does a product look, how does a product feel, so that our product designers could focus on the hardest question. The other thing that changed was we added the front-end developer into our design system team. And this actually had an impact on like the way we deliver to our engineers. Typically, before the design system, when we did a project, there would be a design phase where product design would produce specs and then hand it off to engineers where they would start doing their product development. But now, with the design system, we actually start working on our front-end foundation for the design system as we're doing the design. So this means that when we hand it off to the engineers, they already have a very solid foundation to build their product on. And they can actually build the products much closer to our design intent. And for us, this means that our designers had much more control over every single pixel that goes onto the product. So essentially, our design system became a foundation for all of our products. And it is through this foundation that we were able to achieve consistency and also sanity of how products are customized. And like I pointed out, this foundation became a really great tool for our design team. If we decided to change one layout configuration for a single product, all we need to do from the design team is change the foundation, and it would propagate throughout all of the products that we have. We actually don't need the engineers to be involved in this. So essentially, we've returned the power of the design back to the designers. So this last section over here, I want to go over some of the things that we learned working on this project, and hopefully this might be advice for you guys if you guys ever decide to work on a design system of your own. The first thing we learned is, like, don't try to tackle the biggest project ever. Start with something smaller. For us, that meant that we weren't going to tackle our home energy reports. Instead, we focused on a side product that we had, which is like the business energy report. And compared to the home energy report, the business side only had 10 clients. The home energy report, we were sending out like 30 million paper products a day. So there was no way we could actually touch that without having something screwed up. It's just a fact. So we focused on the smaller project, and we actually learned from it a lot. We learned how we should tool our software so that we can get it onto the engineer's pipeline. We also learned like what's the best way to incorporate our design system into our design process. So this was a great thing because there weren't so many eyeballs looking at us and expecting success. We were actually much more freely able to explore how we wanted to craft our process. And the other thing that I think is important is that you should really try to fit into existing systems. And what I mean by this is that the design system shouldn't be another thing that you impose upon the product. It should fit into whatever engineering system that they have or whatever design or development process that you currently have. And I'll give an example of this. This is our tech stack for OPower. For web, we have Node and Angular. And then for our printed reports and our email, we use Ruby. And then for our printed reports, we process it through print.xml. And our design system is done through SAS, but we had to figure out a way for each of these products how to get our code into these tech stacks. And by doing this, we were actually able to convince the engineers that this was something that made their lives a lot easier instead of imposing more work on them. And I think I can attribute a lot to this, to just being able to get organizational buy-in into this new way of thinking about design that we were trying. And the third thing that I think is important is that you really should document your standards. Or in other words, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And throughout our process of developing our design system, we've tried to document as much everything as possible, but it's actually really hard. There's just so much in the design system that there's just so much thinking in the design system, it's hard to document everything. So one of the ways that we tackled this is that every week on Tuesday evening, everybody in the design team doesn't work on projects, we just focus on documentation. And even with that, like, we can't get through all the documentation that we have right now. And I think I'm going to be here for 3 weeks. So this full 3 weeks, I'm just going to be focusing on documentation and writing down a lot of the design thinking and rules that we have here. And I hope by then I might be able to get through some of the backlog that we have. And the fourth thing, and this is something that we kind of dropped the ball on, and is that you really should know your industry standards. And for us, that meant having accessibility within our web design styles and system from the start. When we started crafting our design system, we didn't think about accessibility at all. And later on, when we were able to get into our web products, this actually became a huge problem. And we had to backtrack a lot of the work and rethink our components and how they're structured to make it fully accessible. And this was a huge requirement for us because a utility company's website needs to be accessible for everybody. So So we've actually been spending the better part of the last 6 months trying to beef up on our knowledge and accessibility and get our design system up to snuff in terms of where it needs to be accessible for everybody. And that's my talk. And hopefully, hopefully it's, by sharing like my work in the last 2-3 years, like you guys learned something, or if you guys want to work on your own design system, maybe there's some advice or a piece of nugget that you guys can take away. But I think we have time for like some Q&A. So.
What did you find of accessibility?
So the thing that we primarily focus on was like the look and feel, and also the words, right? And so when we had our coding standards published in our design system, we did not include like an accessibility portion of it. And there's a lot of great resources out there about accessibility, but for a lot of engineers, they would go straight to our guidelines for how to write our classes in HTML, and they would just copy that, right? So what we need to do is make it a destination so that engineers not only copy the right styles, but they also have the correct code to make a good product for everybody. So that's something that we needed to do. We needed to be like the single source of truth where they can build like not just a beautiful product, but also a usable product for everybody. Yeah, so like in terms of accessibility, what I mean is like when you turn on like speech, and you toggle through, the JAWS, that's what it's called. It says like it's a button element or a link element, and provides you like with context of where it's going to. So that's what I meant. And there's a lot of like consumer websites out there that actually do a really poor job of this. And for consumer websites, it's not really a big deal. But when you're working with a utility customer, you actually have to comply with certain accessibility standards. And there's actually a really interesting study that was done for the US election. And a usability group looked at the accessibility of the Hillary Clinton website versus Trump website. And which one do you think was more accessible? Was more accessible? Trump's website? No, that did not happen at all. So basically, they gave Trump's website like an accessibility score of like D-, whereas like Hillary Clinton's website like aced it. They did every single thing right. It was amazing, but that's just designer speak. So that's where the customization part of our product kind of takes place, right? And before the design system, there wasn't a consistent way to customize our products to look like the utilities. Whereas after the design system, we've made it a way so that they can understand like how do they change our products as a whole through the design system. And we're constantly getting feedback from utility companies on what they want to change and how to change it. So we're constantly updating our design system to reflect that. And the cool part about having this design system is that once we make one change to it, if say a utility company gives us feedback on one web component, right, and we decide to apply it to everybody else, all we need to do now is apply that one change to the foundation, and all of our products get the same update. And this takes away huge amounts of engineering time that would be otherwise devoted to like a client request. Does that make sense? Right. So I think the question is more about like change management. How do we like in some way like backport changes to existing customers. And usually, if we make a change, we have very fine controls about like how things change with our SAS variables, and so we make sure we always have a list of like what people are changing in utility clients. So when we introduce another change into our design system and in our configuration area, our design system, we have a few like most common cases that we can spun up and look at our products and see what that change might look like. So that ensures that we're not breaking like existing clients. The other thing that ensures this process is all of our products are simvered. That's kind of like node speak, but there's a version of things that you can be on. So if a utility client asks for a new feature, we push it out to a newer version, and they need to update their newer version to get that change. Does that make sense? All right. We do. So there's two types of research that we have. Actually, three. There's qualitative research, there's quantitative research, and then there's analytics. And typically, the qualitative research does like the one-on-one user testing, and then the quantitative research does more of the A/B testing flavor. And we use the qualitative research to find trends of what people are doing. Quantitative research to find trends of what people are doing, and then we use the qualitative research to find out why people are doing the things they're doing. So A/B testing is, in terms of how we use it, is more, from a product design's perspective, it's less interesting for us, maybe because like I'm part of UX, but like the quantitative, I'm mixing these terms up. I'm like super jet lagged. So the qualitative research is more interesting to us because it tells us exactly why people are doing the things they're doing. And we use like A/B testing as an indicator of trend, but we don't treat it as like something absolute, because for us, it's really about understanding people's comprehension of the information they're seeing, and that's what drives people to save more and drive their behavioral changes. Mm-hmm. So in terms of getting organizational buy-in, we just needed a sane way to have in terms of a product strategy, in terms of how we're going to make things configurable. So it wasn't manageable when like every single product had a different way for configuration, right? So that's what the design system brought us. It brought a sane way for us to look at all of our products and understand like these are the changes that need to happen. And for customers, that meant that they got a consistent look and feel once they made a change to their things. They didn't have to go and look at every single product and decide like, this is how I want to customize this is how I want to customize this thing. All they needed to do was look at our design system and make that change and agree on like what those changes were, and then we can apply it to everything that basically they're using from us. Sure. Uh-huh. Are you talking about the actual cost of customizing things? Right. Yeah. So I don't think we actually quantified like what's in terms of like time or resources, like what that actually meant in terms of having the design system. We do know that having the design system has helped us greatly in terms of like how we design and develop products. And like I said, I've been working on this for the better part of like 2 years. 2.5 years, and it's still not done. We're still making changes every single day, just because our products are changing. Like there's more and more, there's different client demands that we need to meet. Also, we need to adapt it to like different systems. We actually got bought by Oracle, which is kind of interesting, but Oracle is like, we're trying to like promote design as an important thing within Oracle. So to get our system onto Oracle products, we're going to have to like look at their product strategy and look at their user needs and figure out like how we're going to adapt our design system for that too. So that's why we have a dedicated team just working on the design system. So the question is about tools, like what do we use to create our design system? So fundamentally, our design system in terms of, so the interesting thing about like all of our products is, even for print, is it's actually done in HTML and CSS. So our printed reports, we generate it as an HTML first, and then we print it out. And that was actually the only way we can do it, because every report is customized to each person. So you need to like merge that data in the presentation on the fly. And you need to generate, for us, like 30 million of these. So using like a modern technology like HTML, CSS made the most sense for us. So this actually made it really easy for us, because we wrote all of our styles in Sass, and the only thing left to do was expose it to the right tech stack for each department. And I kind of talked about this earlier, but like for web, like we have our styles exposed as Node, and then for our outbound, which is our reports and also our email, we expose it through Ruby, which is like what they're using. But being able to do that, being able to use like a very basic technology like HTML and Sass, and made it super flexible for us to be able to expose it to any type of tech stack. So later on, if somehow we decide to go back to being a Java system, I don't know if that will happen, but we can just take our design system, adapt it to like the Java system, like through a package of some sort, and then Java engineers will have access to our design system. All right, so thank you guys for listening to my talk. Hopefully it was helpful for you guys. Thank you.